London was once loud. Carts rattled across muddy streets. Church bells marked the hours. Merchants shouted. Children ran between timber houses packed tightly together. Then, in the year 1348, the sound began to disappear. Not all at once. Street by street, door by door. London did not fall in battle. It emptied. This is not a story of kings or conquest. It is the story of ordinary people living through the deadliest outbreak Europe had ever known. This is London during the Black Death. Before the plague, London was one of the largest cities in England, home to nearly 80,000 people. Wooden houses leaned over narrow streets. Waste flowed openly through gutters. Animals lived beside humans. Disease was common, but life went on. The Thames was crowded with ships carrying cloth, grain, and trade from across Europe. Markets were busy. Churches were full. No one knew that death had already begun moving toward the city. The plague arrived through trade. Ships carried more than goods. They carried rats. And on those rats lived fleas infected with a deadly bacterium, Yersinia pestis. By late 1348, the disease reached London. At first, the deaths seemed isolated. Then, entire households vanished. People fell ill suddenly. Fevers burned. Swellings appeared beneath arms and along the neck. Dark marks spread across skin. Most died within days. There was no cure, and no one understood why. As fear spread, daily life collapsed. Homes were sealed shut. Families were trapped inside with the sick. Guards stood watch, enforcing quarantines they barely understood. Carts moved slowly through the streets, collecting the dead. Bodies were covered with cloth and taken away in silence. The poor suffered first. Homeless figures collapsed in doorways. Others lay motionless along the streets, waiting to be collected. Churches emptied. Markets froze in time. Fires burned without anyone tending them. Doctors covered themselves in long robes and masks, believing the air itself was poisoned. By 1349, nearly half of London's population was gone. The city still stood, but it felt hollow. At the height of the plague, burial grounds overflowed. Mass graves were dug outside the city walls. Bells rang constantly, marking death after death after death. Streets once filled with life were silent. Fog and smoke blended above rooftops. The city seemed to suffocate beneath its own weight. Those who survived moved cautiously, avoiding each other, afraid of breath, touch, even prayer. London had become a city of fear. By the winter of 1348, the plague was no longer a rumor. It was everywhere. Entire streets stood silent, not because people were hiding, but because there were fewer people left to hide. Homes remained sealed. Fires burned low and unattended. Smoke drifted through the city without voices beneath it. Death became routine. Not dramatic, not sudden, expected. London's systems began to fail. Food deliveries slowed. Clean water became scarce. Even the people tasked with removing the dead began to disappear. Time itself felt distorted. Days blurred together. Bells rang so often that no single death could be marked anymore. Fear was no longer panic. It was resignation. The city continued to stand, but it no longer functioned as a city. It had become a place people endured, not lived in. This was the moment London realized the plague was beginning to pass slowly. Eventually, the plague began to loosen its grip, not because it was defeated, but because there were fewer people left to claim. Those who survived stepped back into a city that felt unfamiliar. Homes stood empty, doors left open to the wind. Streets felt wider, quieter, stripped of the crowds that once filled them. Entire neighborhoods carried the absence of voices. Beyond the city walls, fields lay untouched. Crops withered where hands were no longer there to tend them. The land had survived, but the people who worked it had not. For the first time in generations, labor became rare, and because it was rare, it became powerful. Workers demanded higher wages. Old laws meant to control them began to fail. The balance that had governed medieval life for centuries quietly shifted. London rebuilt itself slowly, not with celebration, but with caution. Streets were repaired, markets reopened in smaller numbers. Life returned one careful step at a time. The city moved forward, carrying scars that would never fully fade. The Black Death did more than kill. It ended an age. It reshaped society, faith, and power. It changed how people understood life, and how quickly it could be taken away. As evening returned, and lamps once again lit the streets, London endured, quieter, altered, but alive. The city survived the year 1348, and long after the bells stopped ringing, it never forgot it. If you enjoyed this story on the Black Death of London 1348, please subscribe and like this video. It goes a long way to creating these videos. Comment what you want me to create next. Thanks for watching.